I realised what was going on, the way they were dressed, and one of them had a crowbar. I knew there was a robbery on the shop. It was terrifying, it really was. I mean, even now, like if weird cars pull up, I do sort of still get those flutters, like that feeling that something bad's going to happen.
You just watched it. Broad daylight. Within seconds, masked men leap out. One wields a sledgehammer, another secures a strap around the ATM. Then comes the roar of the engine, and the cash machine is wrenched from the wall like it's nothing. This wasn't a daring one-off, it was the calling card of a highly organised gang of criminals who brought a wave of chaos to towns across the UK. Their target? A TMS. Their reward? Over £250,000 in stolen cash. Their method? Blunt force, speed, and complete disregard for anyone in their way, even in full view of the public. Police were baffled. The gang moved quickly, switched vehicles, and struck again before investigators could connect the dots. But while the men in masks thought they were invisible, the trail they left behind told another story. A digital footprint, a CCTV frame, a careless moment that would lead to their downfall. This is the inside story of the gang who turned Britain's streets into war zones for cash, and the relentless operation that finally brought them down. It started where few expected, a quiet market town in Lincolnshire, the kind of place where everyone knew each other and crimes rarely escalated beyond shoplifting or petty vandalism. But on a crisp morning in late February, the peace was shattered. At precisely 7:42 a.m., as commuters queued for coffee and shopkeepers opened shutters, a white transit van pulled up outside a local co-op. Moments later, the van reversed hard into the storefront, smashing glass and crumpling metal. Shouts rang out. People ducked for cover, and out of the van poured 3 masked men in hoodies, gloves, and balaclavas. The leader carried a crowbar and sprinted straight to the ATM embedded in the wall. Another man, stockier, wearing a high-vis vest to blend in, unrolled a heavy-duty tow strap. The third, the driver, kept the engine roaring. In less than 30 seconds, the strap was secured to the ATM. One nod, then the van surged forward, yanking the machine clean out of the wall with a screech that echoed down the street. No more than 2 minutes passed before they were gone, dragging the cash-laden ATM behind them, leaving sparks in their wake. It was brazen, risky, and deeply calculated. Police arrived within minutes. Witnesses were shaken but safe. The van, later found torched in a farmer's field, was reported stolen just 2 days prior from Nottingham. Forensics turned up nothing. No fingerprints, no DNA, just blackened debris and a single scorched crowbar. But the gang wasn't done. 2 days later, a similar hit occurred in Warwickshire, then one in Leicestershire. The MO was identical: a stolen van, a pre-dawn or morning hit, and high-speed getaways. Some towns were hit twice. In a few cases, they even used gas canisters to try and blow the machines open. Each attack was more daring than the last, and despite the visibility, the growing pile of CCTV footage only showed the same thing: black masks, hoodies, gloves, no license plates, no identifying features. Just the methodical violence of men who'd done this before, and were getting better at it. Detectives from multiple forces began linking the cases. A joint task force was quietly formed under the National Crime Agency, pooling surveillance, forensic reports, and vehicle records. The media didn't know it yet, but what seemed like isolated hits were the early signs of a highly organized burglary crew operating across county lines. The gang was moving fast, hitting rural towns and suburban zones where police response times were slower. Their target profile was simple: isolated ATMs in older buildings, usually outside convenience stores or petrol stations, structures that wouldn't hold up under the force of a van. And for a while, it worked. Each raid netted anywhere between £15,000 and £40,000. In some cases, they emptied the entire cash cassette, taking not just banknotes, but also internal security systems, making it harder for police to trace them. The total haul was climbing fast. But as the list of victims grew, so did the urgency. The gang thought they were untouchable. Ghosts who disappeared into traffic and smoke. But one mistake was coming. One slip, one oversight. And when it happened, the entire operation would begin to unravel. By the time the 11th ATM was ripped from the ground, police realized they were dealing with something far bigger than a few thrill-seeking thieves. This was a structured, mobile operation with planning, discipline, and funding. Multiple police forces had already flagged the similarities. Same entry method, same vehicles, same escape routes. But until then, each department had been working its own case. That changed when a joint task force was officially created under Operation Overhang, a collaboration between regional police and the National Crime Agency, NCA. Detectives from Lincolnshire, West Midlands, Leicestershire, and Warwickshire sat down with whiteboards, vehicle logs, and CCTV footage. Patterns emerged. The suspects favored older ATMs, typically outside village shops, small supermarkets, or independent petrol stations, and almost always struck in the early morning or late evening. The vehicles used were nearly always stolen, days before, often from surrounding towns. They used burner phones, disposable clothing, and torched the vans immediately after the job. But that didn't mean they were invisible. One of the first cracks came from a minor oversight. A stolen van had been left too close to a CCTV camera at a rural service station. As investigators pored over the footage, they found a 10-second clip of two masked men filling jerry cans with petrol. What caught detectives' eyes wasn't just the act, it was the boots. Distinctive tan work boots with red stitching, rare, expensive, and, as it turned out, only sold at a handful of retailers in the Midlands. Another lead came from ANPR, automatic number plate recognition, data. Though the gang often removed or swapped plates, on one occasion they were sloppy. A partial plate from a dark blue Audi, seen following one of the vans before a raid, was enough to launch a trace. That Audi belonged to a 34-year-old man named Tyrone West, already on police radar for vehicle theft and handling stolen goods. Surveillance teams were deployed. Tyrone was cautious, but not cautious enough. He met regularly with two other known offenders, Dean Fowler and Aidan Nash. Both had long rap sheets: burglary, aggravated theft, and possession of explosives. Soon, wiretaps and undercover surveillance painted the picture detectives had been waiting for. The trio met at a nondescript industrial unit in Dudley, leased under a fake name. Inside, officers discovered a hub of activity: tools, bolt cutters, jerry cans, ropes, gas canisters, and, most importantly, stripped ATM components. One still had a serial number visible. The task force had found the gang's safe house, but it wasn't just three men. Phone records, CCTV, and tracked vehicles began revealing a wider web. At least 8 suspects were directly involved: drivers, lookouts, and even a locksmith. The crew had access to blank key fobs and tools typically used by professional car thieves. Their planning was cold and precise. And as detectives dug deeper, they discovered something else: encrypted messages on burner phones using coded slang, references to future raids, and post-job cash splits. The gang even discussed watching news reports after each heist, laughing at how close the police had come, but the clock was ticking. The next phase would require a move from observation to action. By early autumn, the task force knew the gang was preparing for another job. Surveillance had confirmed multiple suspects gathering at the Dudley unit. Burner phones were switched back on. CCTV showed new fuel cans and reinforced tow straps being loaded into a white Ford Transit, stolen 2 days earlier from a builder's yard in Derby. But there was a complication. The police needed more than surveillance to make arrests stick. They needed to catch them in the act, or at least recover stolen cash, tools, or direct evidence linking them to the raids. They had to time it perfectly, so they waited. On a Monday morning in September, ANPR flagged the Transit, moving south along the M6. A second vehicle, the same dark Audi, previously connected to Tyrone West, followed closely behind. Both turned off near Coventry. By 5 a.m., the gang's van was parked outside a small village shop on a quiet high street. Officers in unmarked cars watched from a distance. The strike team was already mobilizing, but they had strict orders: no premature moves. At 5:18 a.m., the operation began. The van reversed into the shop's facade with a thunderous crunch. 3 men jumped out. One wielded a hammer, the other 2 rushed to secure the strap. As sparks flew, the ATM buckled under the force, torn from the brickwork. But this time, they didn't make it far. As the van tried to flee, armed response teams moved in. The road was blocked within seconds. Officers smashed the driver's side window and pulled the men from the vehicle. A 4th man, the lookout, was arrested nearby, found hiding behind a skip with a police scanner and walkie-talkie. Inside the van, £38,000 in cash, a sledgehammer, gloves, and a petrol can. Police stormed the compound and recovered gas canisters, dismantled ATM parts, burner phones, and CCTV jammers. In a hidden drawer, £17,000 in fresh notes and a notebook listing towns, dates, and targets. Over the following 48 hours, 5 more men were arrested in coordinated takedowns across Birmingham, Wolverhampton, and Nottingham. One tried to escape through a back window. Another was caught while loading bags into a taxi. One suspect even surrendered while still wearing a hoodie with traces of brick dust from the last hit. For months, they'd operated like ghosts, hitting and vanishing before anyone could react. But on that morning, their world collapsed in less than an hour. The gang's final job, meant to be just another payday, became their downfall. Interrogations followed, but most refused to talk. Their silence didn't matter, the evidence did. CCTV matched timelines. Phone data placed them near at least 9 crime scenes. Forensic analysis confirmed tool matches, and the recovered ATM parts, all traced back to machines stolen over the past 6 months. The final count? 13 confirmed raids, over £250,000 stolen, more than £60,000 still unaccounted for. But now, with the crew behind bars and the operation dismantled, it was time for justice to be served. When the trial opened at Birmingham Crown Court, the courtroom was packed. Victims, journalists, and law enforcement officers all gathered to witness the downfall of a gang that had terrorized communities across the Midlands. The defendants, now clean-shaven and suited, looked nothing like the masked men seen in CCTV clips played before the jury. But the footage didn't lie. Prosecutors began by laying out the timeline. 13 confirmed raids, each with the same blueprint. Stolen van, forced entry, masked suspects, and high-value ATM extractions. They painted a picture of not just a criminal crew, but a professional operation, one that required coordination, planning, and a clear chain of command. The Crown's lead barrister presented damning evidence, GPS data from seized phones showing movement from the gang's safe house to target locations, security camera clips placing suspects near the crime scenes days before each raid. Forensic specialists confirmed fingerprint matches on tools and cash boxes. One of the most compelling pieces was the notebook seized from the industrial unit. Inside were handwritten notes, a crude ledger of past and future raids, including figures like COV, 28,000, and walks, 18,000. Prosecutors argued it was a financial record, while the defense claimed it was fictional planning for a script. The jury didn't buy it. Over 2 weeks, the court heard testimony from police, forensic analysts, shop owners, and local residents. One shopkeeper recalled the trauma. "They came like it was a war zone. We're a family shop, never had trouble before. Now I sleep with the lights on." The prosecution also played a wiretap recording of Tyrone West laughing about one of the jobs. "Mate, we had it out in 30 seconds flat, like flipping Formula One." It wasn't just incriminating, it was cold, detached. Proof, the prosecution argued, that the men viewed the damage, danger, and fear they caused as part of the game. The defense teams tried to sow doubt. They claimed their clients were framed or had unknowingly been involved in car repairs or legit industrial work. Some pointed fingers at each other, others said nothing. But the digital evidence and chain of communications made their positions untenable. Dean Fowler, who the prosecution identified as the planner, was silent throughout. But jurors were shown dozens of encrypted chats from his seized burner phone, including messages like, "COV Tuesday, blue van, you bring chains." Eventually the jury retired. After just 8 hours, they returned unanimous verdicts on all main defendants, guilty of conspiracy to commit burglary, theft, and criminal damage. The sentencing was swift and brutal. Dean Fowler, 37, was sentenced to 12 years. Tyrone West, 34, received 10 years. Aidan Nash, 32, got 9 years. 4 other gang members received between 4 and 8 years depending on their roles. In total, the gang was handed over 60 years in prison time. The judge called the crimes a cynical, calculated attack on public infrastructure and small-town livelihoods, and said the gang had shown no regard for the fear, destruction, or social impact of their actions. But the court's final blow wasn't just prison. A proceeds of crime hearing was scheduled, aiming to claw back the missing £60,000 and more. Justice had been served, but questions remained. While the convictions had brought justice, investigators knew the story wasn't finished. £250,000 had been stolen, yet only around £60,000 had been recovered during the arrests and raids. That left nearly £190,000 unaccounted for. Where had it gone? The Proceeds of Crime team began their next mission: track the money. But this wasn't about tracing bank transfers or flagged accounts. The gang had worked in cash, off-grid, and under the radar. It was all buried, laundered, or hidden in plain sight. First stop, lifestyle audits. Dean Fowler, officially unemployed for over a year, had somehow paid cash for a 2016 BMW X 5 months before the first known raid. The vehicle was registered to a relative, but insurance and CCTV footage proved Dean was the primary driver. Further searches revealed receipts for custom alloy wheels, high-end speakers, and a personalized plate that was never installed. Then there was Tyrone West. Despite claiming job seekers allowance, he had taken 3 international holidays in the past year. His passport showed recent trips to Spain, the Canary Islands, and Dubai. At one point, investigators found pictures of him online, standing poolside with gold chains and designer clothes, all while supposedly earning nothing. As the financial forensics deepened, the team discovered several ghost businesses, fake car wash companies, cash-only tire services, and mobile phone repair stalls used to launder stolen funds. One garage in Wolverhampton had processed over £40,000 in cash income over a 6-month span, but had no business license, no tax filings, and no working phone number. More leads followed. A storage unit in Dudley, rented under a false name, revealed bags of cash-stained clothing, a small safe containing £7,200, and a handwritten note reading, "Shed 2 equals 15K over Nash equals 5, over Kev equals 2, rest left at ends." But who was N? The team suspected a 9th man, a silent partner, someone who hadn't participated directly in the raids but had managed the money trail. He was never seen in any of the crime scenes, but name after name pointed back to a Nigel Ashcroft, a former mechanic turned property renovator who'd been seen meeting Nash and West multiple times. Nigel wasn't arrested initially. He hadn't been caught in any act, and the evidence was circumstantial. But a raid on his semi-detached home, Nigel wasn't arrested initially. He hadn't been caught in any act, and the evidence was circumstantial. But a raid on his semi-detached home turned up £18,000 in a hidden ceiling panel and a burner phone that still had messages from Fowler. It was enough. Nigel was charged with money laundering and handling criminal property, and in a quiet trial 3 months later, he pleaded guilty. His sentence, 4 years in prison and a lifetime financial restriction order. The cash was seized and his home was repossessed under a confiscation ruling. But even with Nigel down, authorities knew they'd never recover all the stolen funds. Some had likely been buried, spent overseas, or handed off to family. Even now, whispers in the community suggested there were hidden stashes in sheds, lockups, and buried fields. Still, the financial clawback was one of the largest ever connected to a cash machine gang in UK history. Over £110,000 recovered in assets and property. But even as the dust settled, one thing was clear. This gang wasn't born overnight, and their story went far deeper than just stolen vans and ATMs. To truly understand how the gang pulled off such a bold crime spree, you have to go back to the estates of Wolverhampton, Birmingham, and the Black Country, where poverty, pride, and pressure collided in a generation raised on fast money and survival instincts. Dean Fowler was once a promising young footballer. Coaches recalled his natural athleticism, his leadership on the pitch. But by 17, he'd fallen in with older boys who showed him a quicker path to status through stolen bikes, hot cars, and eventually high-stakes burglary. His first conviction came at 19, aggravated vehicle theft. Within a decade, he'd graduated to planning industrial-scale crimes. Tyrone West grew up just a few streets away. A known face in car theft circles, he was the one they called when you needed a clean VIN scratched or a tracker disabled. He had a talent for wiring, not for legal work, but for getting a car running in 20 seconds. He floated between low-end garages and chop shops, always chasing the next hustle.